everybody, and welcome back to INTR 101. Today's lecture is all on note-taking. So we're going to talk about some different styles of note-taking, what goes into note-taking, all the ins and outs of how to take really good class notes. So with that, let's talk about some of those elements of note-taking, right? And the things that kind of go into taking really quality notes are being prepared, being present, actually recording the information, and then reviewing and revising our notes. So what I want you to do is think about it for a minute and, contemplate how you prepare for class. What does that look like for you? For me, it was making sure I had everything in my bag ready to go, having my bottle of water with me, gotta have the trusty Nalgene, and then heading off. So what does preparing for class look like for you? So some things that go into being prepared for your classes are making sure that you have your note-taking materials, right? Like nothing's worse than getting to class and realizing that you don't have the notebook you need or a pencil or something like that. Being prepared also involves doing any of the readings that are required before class. So we'll talk a little bit more about critical reading in another lecture, but actually making sure to have those reading done is really critical. And then looking at announcements. So you want to make sure that you have all that you need, especially if the instructor made a special announcement of like, hey, bring blank unlined paper with you to class today, or make sure you have, this printout, we're going to go through it. So just looking into some of those things beforehand is really great. And then looking to your syllabus. So every syllabus is different. You won't always have like what's going to happen day by day throughout your class, but it is a good place to check out to see, kind of what's coming up, what sort of material you might be covering today, any little tips for that. And then make sure you print off any materials you'll need. So whether it's a worksheet that they posted in an announcement, or if your instructor has like the slides available beforehand, printing those out so that you have them as you're in class and you can take notes on them. So all in all, you want to make sure, like Scar, that you are prepared. So be prepared. Okay, now our next element was being present. So again, think to yourself, what does being present in class actually mean? What goes into that? Now, a simple breakdown is being present is the same as active participation. It means you're engaging with the material. So before class, that looks like turning off your technology, setting your phone in your backpack, putting it on airplane mode, whatever you need in order for it to not be a distraction and something that pulls you away from the class material. And then making sure that you have everything out that you need right then, Don't just like sit down and then scramble as the lecture starts. When you get to class, pull out your notebook, pull out your pens, get to the right page, put your date on top, and then, engage with the material. And during class, active participation and being present looks like listening and looking for clues and cues in the material. So these can be things like vocal emphasis. So if your instructor is, really stressing a term, they're repeating it a lot, maybe they say it with a lot of enthusiasm. So if I were going through this and I was like, monotone, 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 vocal emphasis, right? That could be something important to look for or listen for. And then also look out for visual emphasis. So this is things like if they've bolded a term, underlined it, put a box around it, really pointed to it at the board. All of these things tell you that like, hey, this material is really important. I should make sure that I include it in my notes and I put a little box around it as well to give myself a hint that this is going to be something that might come up on the test or just later in the class. So now we're gonna talk about some actual notes, and I want you to take a second and look at my notes that I wrote. These were on a math class on math biology that I took, and just tell me what's wrong with them, criticize them, really trash them for me. Get some anger out. Okay. So what I think is wrong with my own notes is that there is no title or date. I don't know when I took these notes. I only vaguely remember what class it's for, but like, I could be wrong. There isn't any clear distinction of importance. So I don't have any sort of hierarchy in my notes to tell me what is a main idea versus what is a supporting idea. Everything's in the same line, so I can't tell. And nothing is underlined or highlighted. So if you look closely, there's clearly some equations and some discussion of what certain variables are, but you can't tell if they're important or where they are in the paper because I don't give them any sort of significance. So these notes could really be improved. So just some simple improvements that I could take is actually putting a date and title on them, going through and highlighting or underlining some stuff. That would make these notes so much more readable. So we're going to talk first about some really general strategies for organizing your notes, and then we'll get into some specific strategies. So number one, this is what I tell everybody, label your notes. And the reason is you want to make future you happy. And the easiest way to do that is to organize with present you. So include the date. It's helpful if you miss a day and need to fill in your info. Or if you're taking the class with a friend and they miss a day, you can very easily show them what lecture they missed. It just makes it nice. Additionally, some of professors don't necessarily cover, like on a test, they won't be like, oh, we're covering chapters 7 through 10. They might say, we're covering things from October 1st to November 5th, right? So actually knowing where that is in your notes can be really useful. And then if you have like one big notebook with all of your classes, it's really critical to title your notes with the class and even the lecture. So, some lectures are titled, right? If you were taking notes in this class, you could title this INTR 101 note taking, so if there is some sort of clear distinction there, you can do that. And again, it just helps with organization. So I like to give broad titles to my notes so that I can clearly see like, oh yeah, this was the section where we discussed factoring trinomials, like that's something that I can look to really easily. So, sometimes I meet with students, they're like, I really don't want to carry around a bunch of notebooks. Like I'm in 6 classes, I have 3 of them a day, like I don't want to carry 3 binders or notebooks with me. That's totally fine. What you can do instead is take a stack of loose leaf paper to your classes, like stick it in a folder so it looks nice. And then really make sure you label those notes, adding dates, page numbers, everything like that. And then all you got to do is at the end of the day, take the loose leaf paper out of your folder where you were keeping it, and then stick it into another folder or binder that you have for each class back at home. So you're still keeping all of your notes together for each different area, but you aren't having to carry as much stuff around with you. And I feel that, like if you live off campus and you're coming to campus for the day, you might have notebooks, a laptop, a lunch, a whole lot of stuff with you, and it just doesn't make sense to carry that around consistently. Or if you just don't like a lot of clutter, only having some loose leaf paper can give you a lot of kind of creative freedom as well as space to like rearrange your notes, and then putting them together later just keeps you organized. So some general strategies for actually recording your information is paraphrase. So restate the information in your own words. And what this does is help with that active participation, that active engagement, because you're challenging yourself in the moment while you're learning the stuff to kind of make it more understandable for yourself. And it's a really good way to help you identify the important information, because as you're paraphrasing stuff, you're really taking the time to synthesize what's happening in the lecture, and you're able to pull out all of the key details. On that note, anything that are really like any key details need to be precise. So things like formulas, definitions, dates, and locations, don't paraphrase those. Make sure you get them down exactly as the instructor writes them, because those are things that are easily tested on and definitely come up in other things. So if you're in a physics class, you want to make sure that you have the equation written down correctly and precisely, because chances are you're going to use it in your homework problems, and other problems in that lecture. So you want to make sure that that's really specific. And the same goes for definitions, right? Like you want to make sure that a term that gets defined in your poli-sci class is really clear and precise for you. Now, I do want to make a quick note, the paraphrasing doesn't necessarily work for language classes where you're learning some like really specific rules. In that instance, you're going to want to take down the information exactly as the instructor says it. Just because that sort of material is a little bit different, you're learning a new language versus studying a broader topic. So a little bit of difference there. Now, some general strategies for STEM classes, so science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Learn the shorthand for the subject. It's going to make taking notes a lot faster and a lot easier. So I can speak in experience for math. There's little signs that mean like such that, for all, there exists, all of those, they all have their own little shorthand symbol. And learning those can be really helpful to allow you to take notes more quickly. Another thing, leave space for extra notes. So what I mean by this is if an equation is given, leave some space around it because chances are you're going to fill it in with some small details, some little reminders for yourself of like, oh, this equation doesn't work in this case. So giving yourself a little bit of a buffer can help with that. Include units when necessary, when needed. It's really useful to, if you're solving an equation for something, make sure you know what type of thing you're solving. Is it a force equation? Is it a pH equation? Like add whatever units are needed for that. And then include any examples that are given in the class. Make sure you have those written down because they're going to be really helpful for homework and for studying. And they also allow you to build a much better understanding of the material that you're covering. And then summarize in your own words what a formula or equation means. So we have the technical symbol version, but try translating that to simple words so that you have a more layman's term definition understanding of what's going on there. Now, some recording the information, some note-taking tips for online classes. Make sure you take notes on the readings, the videos, the recorded lectures, all of the elements of the class, because all of that info is really important. And because it can be a lot harder to learn online for some folks, giving yourself the best foot forward, giving yourself the most amount of stuff that you can look at really helps. And then take notes from discussion boards and instructor feedback. So if you're turning in a lot of essays, write a little note to yourself of like, oh, the instructor brought up this part in my essay. They said I needed to, look more closely at this thing. Having that record for yourself can make all of your future assignments a lot better. And then again, categorize your class notes based on topics. So making sure that you have things together for the classes and then within those classes for each of the different aspects. So, keep all of your class reading notes together, keep all of your lecture notes together, and keep all of your supplemental notes together. And then most importantly is keep up with the lectures. So try not to put everything off till the end of the week, right? So we can use this class as an example. I encourage folks to watch one of the lectures on Monday, one of the lectures on Wednesday, and then make sure that you have assignments in by Friday. If you leave everything until Friday night, it can be really stressful to get all of it done. So try doing that with your own classes as well, some of those other online ones, and check out the time management lecture again for some tips on how to do that. So now we're going to go over a couple of different note-taking strategies. So the 4 big ones that we're going to cover are outlining, charting, the Cornell method, and mapping. So the outline method is a great method for all sorts of different subjects. It's honestly what I see students use the most. It's really versatile and it's really easy to take notes while you're listening to the lecture. So it doesn't require prep. There isn't a whole lot of really fine detail that goes into it. So it's really, really useful. And what it does is creates this virtual hierarchy. So you put your main topic and then you indent with supporting details. And for any supporting details to those, you indent again. And you label them, with ABC, 1, 2, 3, Roman numerals, whatever works best for you. I use a lot of bullet points and different symbols next to them to kind of create this hierarchy for myself. Now the next method is something called charting. So this is a great method if you have lots of people / events to kind of keep track of. So what you would do is you'd break up, okay, a column for events, a column of where it happened, a column of how long it happened for, and then like main points that occurred. So this requires a little bit of preparation, but if you're doing readings before class, you can easily put together a chart that you can fill in throughout the lecture. This is also a really good way to rewrite notes for review. So maybe you take all of your American foreign policy notes in an outline method. When you go to study, you can create a chart and kind of rewrite those notes into the chart method so that you have a more structured picture of what's going on and you can more easily compare and contrast things this way. So a really fun one to do. So the next is the Cornell Method, and this might look familiar to you. I know a lot of high schools teach this method, high schools and middle schools, and encourage their students to use them. Sometimes they require students to use this method. And what it does is it structures the notes a little bit differently. So you have one part of the paper that has like details, bullet points, diagrams, all of the little things. And then you have this blank part on the left-hand side where you include like broad subjects or broad topics that are covered, as well as like, oh, this is a main idea, this is a vocab word. And then you have a summary at the bottom in order to help you like revisit the material and summarize it in your own terms. So this method requires, a little bit of prep beforehand. You can kind of go through some pages and draw the lines that you need to give this structure. There are also Cornell notebooks that already have the structure like put in them. I don't use this method all that much. The one thing that I really, really like and do use is the summary part of it. I think those are super useful. But for me, I just like to take an outline method and I don't want to have to put in, all of these extra lines and things for myself. And that's okay. Finding whatever method works best for you and adapting it to make the most sense for your note-taking methods is what's really important. So the final method that we're going to talk about is mapping. So this method is really, really great for connecting ideas. So, in some classes, you have this really big web of ideas and concepts that comes up throughout the semester, and creating a map for them is a really useful way to visualize all of that. Unfortunately, this method is kind of hard to do while you're in class, especially if you're using ruled paper, just because it's hard to estimate just how many topics and main ideas and supporting details are going to be in that lecture, and you might kind of run out of room as you're trying to create this map. But it is a really great way to review your notes and to study. So this is a way that you can take, like 3 sections of notes and kind of connect them all together. And what you'll do is you'll put your main topic in the center, connect it to some main ideas, supporting ideas, and then details that go into those. And you start to see how everything kind of webs across. And you might notice that like, oh, one of these main ideas connects to another one, so you can kind of draw an arrow and write in some details there as well. So we're going to talk a little bit about trying to make a map, and I encourage you all to try this out. It goes into part of what is due for your deliverable for this lecture. So I encourage you to find a topic in your notes that you could create a concept map with, right? This won't work for every single class, right? Like a language class is going to be kind of hard to create a concept map for. But a science or English or literature class might be like perfect for it. So find a topic and then connect that topic with some other things that you've learned in the class. I encourage you to do at least 3 different things. And then star the topics or connections that you feel you need a little more information on. So maybe you know that generally X corresponds to Y, but you aren't totally sure how that connection is made. Making a little note for yourself to look into it deeper is a nice way to check your understanding. So the last little aspect of note-taking that we're going to talk about is reviewing and revising. So oftentimes, and I'm totally a person who did this too, you take your notes after class, you close your notebook, and you set it aside, and you never look at those notes again until it's time to study for the test. And that was me. I did the same exact thing. But it can be a lot more useful and a lot less stressful in the long run to revisit your notes after class. So I encourage folks to summarize some key points. Go back at the end of the week, look through the material that you covered that week, and just write a quick summary of it for yourself. This also gives you a chance to fill in any gaps in your notes. So while you're taking them, you may have starred something and been like, I don't know what this is, need to come back to it. And actually making sure that you do come back to it sooner than right before a test is really helpful for yourself. And then it can also be really great to review your notes before the next class. So, quickly when you get to class, just look back over yesterday's material, refresh your memory on what was covered, and that can really help to cement the ideas in today's lecture. And then you can always rewrite your notes to solidify concepts. So we talked about this with both the charting and the mapping methods. Rewriting your notes in a new way that shows the information in a different light can be really helpful for getting those concepts down. So another thing that I want to encourage you to do is just take a couple sections of your notes and write 2 to 3 sentence summaries for those pages or sections. Within those summaries, list out important dates, details, equations, anything that's like really key, and then highlight the sections that you have questions on. So another wonderful aspect of these summaries is if you're consistently writing them throughout the semester, maybe at the end of each week, when it comes time to take a test, rather than having to reread all of your notes right away, you can read the summaries first, and you can start to sort the material into what you feel comfortable with and what you need to review more. So if you read a summary and you go, oh yeah, totally remember that, feeling really confident about it, you can set that in one pile. If you read another summary where you're like, ooh, not 100% sure on that, I should really look into a couple of these terms, then you can set that in a different pile and focus on that more heavily for studying. So summaries are really great, really useful, highly encourage them. And it's important to keep in mind that your notes are a study tool. So at the end of the day, they need to be really helpful. So feel free to take any of these different methods and adapt them so that they make the most sense for you, the classes you're taking, and the way that you learn information. Okay, so with that, we're going to jump over to our BB Learn page really quick. And I want to talk just a little bit about the weekly content for this week. So we go over to week 3, and you'll see our slides are up. So our note-taking deliverable, keep in mind, I want you to submit just one of the following. You can either create a concept map for the material in one of your classes. I want you to connect a main idea with at least 4 supporting ideas, details, definitions, concepts. So you can look back to that example in the slideshow to see how to do that. Or you can rewrite a page of your notes that you have taken this semester using the tips that you learned in the lecture. So you can, take some of your notes and create a chart with them. You can just rewrite them so that they're much more organized. I just want you to take and really dive into those notes and kind of improve them for yourself. And if you do that, I want you to include a 1 to 3 sentence summary of the material on that page, just so you can see it for yourself. And then just include a before and after picture of those notes. And when you're submitting this, you can literally just take a photo of the notes that you're doing or the chart that you made and submit that. If you have any questions or any issues, you can always email it to me as well. But with that, that is all I have for our note-taking lecture. So I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day and a lovely fall, and I will see you all later. Bye-bye.